Welcome to our 5-minute Bible study. We are continuing to look at the book of Revelation. We're at Revelation chapter 6 today. We've seen the Lamb has stepped forward and taken the scroll from the right hand of God. This is the scroll that represents the unfolding of God's plan. It is sealed with 7 seals. The Lamb begins to break the seals one at a time. And with each breaking, with each opening of a seal, something significant comes forward. Today we're going to look at the first 4 of the seals, which are traditionally called the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, one of the most familiar images from the book of Revelation. It's referenced this way because with each of the seals, a rider on a horse comes forward. I watched as the Lamb opened the first of the 7 seals. And I heard one of the 4 living creatures say in a voice like thunder, "Come!" I looked, and there before me was a white horse. Its rider held a bow. He was given a crown. He rode out as a conqueror, bent on conquest. Now that's the first seal, but each of the 4 follows a pattern. The seal is broken. The voice shouts out, "Come!" and a rider comes forth. We saw the first one. The second rider will be riding on a red horse. He has the power to take peace from the earth, to make people kill one another. He comes with a large sword. After the third seal, the rider comes out on a black horse. The rider is holding a pair of scales in his hand, and he's shouting out, 2 pounds of wheat for a day's wage, 6 pounds of barley for a day's wage. And when the 4th seal is opened, a rider comes forward on a pale horse. It says his name is Death, and Hades follows close behind. He's given power over 1/4 of the earth to kill by sword, by famine, by plague, and by the wild beast. Okay, so these are the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. What are they? Or who are they? I think as we look carefully, we see that they represent forces in the world. So for example, the first is riding a white horse, has a bow. He rides out for conquest. He obviously represents war, the warrior, the conqueror, and the devastation that war brings to the world. In this time in history, people living in the Roman Empire, their greatest fear was of the Parthians. The Parthians were just to the east of the Roman Empire boundaries. They were powerful cavalry. And the Romans always feared that power of cavalry against them. They'd been defeated many times in battle by the Parthians. And so this first rider is sort of that image of the Parthian, but it's the image of the warrior. So we have war. You remember in Matthew 24, when Jesus gave his last discourse on the end times, he said, "Don't be deceived, because there'll be wars and there'll be rumors of wars. And these will continue until the end." I think this rider is the same image, war. And then there's the second rider who is on a red horse. He takes peace from the earth. I think this rider represents violence or civil breakdown, the breakdown of society. You know, when war comes, that tends to break down social structures, and the following is oftentimes social disintegration, violence, harm, lack of peace. So this rider represents the breakdown of society, the upswing of violence, peace being absent. And then the third rider on the black horse. He's given a pair of scales. These are not the scales of justice. These are the scales for weighing out the price of food. For he says, you got to pay 2 pounds, or you get 2 pounds of wheat for a day's wage, 6 pounds of barley for a day's wage. This rider represents famine. It's a time of famine. You have to work all day just to buy enough barley to feed your family for that day. Or you have to work all day just to buy enough wheat to feed yourself for today. That's what that means. It's a famine, and people are in terrible destitution. You barely got enough food to get by, much less pay for anything else. When war comes, there also comes lack of peace, and there also comes famine. And then you see the 4th horseman of the apocalypse. He's riding a pale horse. He's called Death. Hades follows behind him. Hades, of course, is the place of the dead. He has the power to kill by sword, famine, plague. when you have war, when you have violence, when you have famine, death follows. And so you have these terrible effects of horrible death sweeping the land. Jesus is saying, as time moves forward, people stay in rebellion against God. These are the consequences. War, violence, famine, death. These are the four horsemen of the apocalypse. And Jesus says these are the consequences of a world in rebellion against God. These are the forces that are unleashed against a world that is in rebellion against God. You see, when you're talking about the judgment of God, oftentimes the judgment of God is simply God allowing us to reap what we sow. If we sow rebellion, if we sow sinfulness, if we go our own way, we reap what we sow. And Jesus is saying, if you go a way that is contrary to the way of God, if society turns away from God, so often what comes is war and violence and famine and death. So as the four first seals are opened, we see the consequences of a world that is not following the way of God. Our only hope, of course, is to turn back to Jesus. That comes later in the book. But right now he's showing us what happens when we don't follow the way of the Lord. Okay, tomorrow or next time I should say, we'll start looking at the remainder of the seals. But just keep in mind those first four seals represent those forces that are unleashed, those consequences, as it were, when we don't walk in the way of God. The four horsemen, they're war, violence, famine, and death. But Jesus is our answer. That's why we need to turn to Him. That's why we need to stay true to Him. Okay, you have a good day. Hope you have a blessed day. And next time together, we'll continue to look at these seals as the last three are opened. I'll see you next time.